The humans were out and creating civilizations, you know, evolving, all that good stuff. Literally, human history up to like a certain point is literally just our history. So you're canon in Warhammer, technically. It's high praise. But at the beginning of humanity, the Emperor of Mankind was born. The Emperor of Mankind is essentially what would happen if a human reached like the maximum potential of evolution of what a human could get. A master psyker, a just perfect Adonis of a man. Huge, like super tall, towering over you, charismatic, can lead nations, really intelligent, all that stuff. Just the perfect person, except for one fatal flaw. The Emperor's a massive dickhead. He's a massive asshole and a really bad dad, but we'll get to that. And he realized really early on, he is meant for something important. So he laid in wait, guiding humanity bit by bit from the shadows, becoming world leaders and prominent figures to guide humanity into what he deemed as the right path. Eventually, humans became spacefaring. They built their big rocket ships and traveled through the universe, colonizing all these planets, figuring out warp travel and going through the warp, colonizing everything with these cool things called STCs, standard template constructs, which are like the big shit in modern 40K. And making all these amazing worlds, trading with each other, being a great just federation of humans. Until eventually, robots uprose and fought back, the Men of Iron, all that stuff. It doesn't matter, yada, yada, yada. But this would all come to an end. Dubbed the Golden Age of humanity, humanity at its height, technological ascendancy, ridiculously level, like powerful tech. And this is all well and good until the Eldar fucked up. Literally.
Now you fucked up! You have fucked up now! Now you fucked up! Now you fucked up!
During the 20 millennia that humans were expanding outward and colonizing all these planets, the Eldar were doing just the same. And they were developing so rapidly in both civilization, population size, and just technology that they became the dominant force in the universe. And a pretty important thing about Eldar is they have much different emotions than a person does. Their emotions are a lot stronger, more heightened, and it takes a lot more to bring up that emotion. And when Eldar society reached a perfect utopia, there was no need for working or strife anymore. So your life was just accumulating knowledge, skills, or pleasure. And that's primarily what the large section of Eldar society did. They created pleasure cults where they would act out their most hedonistic and depraved desires. And another little fact about Eldar is they were so psychically in tuned that if you killed one, they'd just come back later. As they just get reincarnated, they have a new body, and poof, same person, same memories, just new body. So murder didn't mean anything. And murder kind of got then intertwined with sex in that society. And a few Eldar saw how it was going. Some had some premonitions and saw how things were ending up and decided to just get out of town. They saw the writing on the wall and decided, we're just going to dip. So they left on these continent-sized craft worlds and went out and just made new societies. Some even gave up technology entirely. And those would be called the Exodites. They went out, just colonized, lived off the land, rode dinosaurs and the like, as you do when you give up technology. And then we get to the main problem and the main cause of the fall. With all of the psychic just beings that were out murder fucking each other 24/7, there was so much just psychic energies and emotions trickling into the warp that it created a new chaos god. This one, Slaanesh, the prince of pleasure, the chaos god of hedonism, excess, all of that horrible stuff. Everything that the Eldar were exhibiting in that time. And the birth of a new god is quite the calamitous thing, as Slaaneish's birth ripped open reality itself as a giant like tear in space, later to be called the Eye of Terror, opened up. And this threw the warp all into whack. Slaanesh got all the other Chaos Gods all riled up and ready for another go at the material world, and claimed every single Eldar soul in the process, as the core homeworlds and main just bulk of the population instantly died and their souls were fed to Slaanesh. There were a few survivors, some of which those that worshipped and created just religions out of the hedonism that they were exhibiting at the time. Those that ran off to the fringe of the universe in their craft worlds or their exodite planets, stuff like that. And as well, the birth of Slaanesh made the warp like impossible to travel through, because it created a lot of things called warp storms, which are just literally like almost like giant storms in the sea of the warp that just make it impossible to travel through without dying horribly. And as such, humans were completely cut off from each other. All of these planets needed trade and communications with other planets to survive. And to just put a little bit of little cherry on top, a lot of psychers started popping up with humans. At first, a lot of people thought, this is pretty neat. You can cast fireballs, you shoot your little lightnings and such. Wizards are real. Sick. But with the tear in space and the warp being a lot more active and these new psychers not knowing how to control their powers, they became little beacons in reality for demons to come through, possess, kill, and pop out into real space and cause mayhem. This obviously very problematic, and the only planets that survived were those that led witch hunts and killed or subjugated all of the psychers. And during this time too, a lot of planets just died, as they had no connections with other resources. They couldn't get water or food or important resources, so they just died out. And a lot of others, cut off completely from the rest of humanity, started developing new languages, religions, cultures, all of that. Because when you're cut off from the rest of humanity, like, there's nothing really keeping you all tied together. And this was like this for a long time, about 10 millennia. So generations upon generations upon generations, like ad nauseum, developed these new planets. And this would be like this until the 30th millennia, where the warp storms ended and the Emperor of Mankind rose to take back what humanity had.
We have come for your
planet.
Get the fuck out of my house!
The Emperor came out of hiding on Earth, now called Terra, which as well, Terra was now a barren landscape, as for possible colonization and through trading and a lot of industrialization, Terra had no more water on it. And it became a Mad Max hellscape with techno-barbarians, crazed cultists leading everything. It was pretty rough. But the Emperor came out of hiding with these genetic super soldiers called Thunder Warriors, and he reconquered Terra. In the process, also eliminating all religion on Terra, as he saw the threat that the Chaos Gods had. And a big thing with the Chaos Gods, and a lot of things with the war, belief fuels the gods. And the only way for them to get powerful is for things to exemplify their traits. You murder someone, you feed corn. You get a cold, you feed Nurgle. You lie to your friend, Tzeentch, and take some copious amount of cocaine. That's for Slaanesh. And if you eliminate belief in gods, that eliminates the Chaos Gods. At least that's what the Emperor thought. He was wrong in this thought, but, you know, he's worth a try. And this would be called the Imperial Truth. That science is real, God is cringe, and humanity's place is at the top. And he took over Terra and took over the solar system. And as well, after he took this all over, he went back to the drawing board. These Thunder Warriors, pretty cool, but they were just big dumb meatheads that knew nothing but to kill. He needed something a little better. So he created two types of beings. First one were the Primarchs. They were like his kids. Literally like parts of his power. If the Emperor's a god, which he'd be really upset if he said that, but later to be worshipped as one. If the Emperor was a god, the Primarchs are like his demigods. They have a portion of his power that he like puts into them, and they're really strong. There's a few really cool ones. Jagatai Khan, Genghis Khan on a jet bike, Conrad Kurz, absolute gremlin terrorist, like Batman and the Joker, like we're the same person. Rogel Dorn, my boy, love him to death. And more and more and more, I'm not going to get into that. He also made Space Marines, which you've definitely seen. I don't know, like, they're everywhere. But he killed off all the Thunder Warriors, replaced them with his Space Marines, got ready for his big Great Crusade. But the Chaos Gods weren't really a big fan of the Emperor. They saw him as a giant threat, so they wanted to thwart him a little bit. So Tzeentch, or at least some portion of Tzeentch, pops into the Emperor's big lab in the Himalayan mountains, just sweeps the table that all the test tube baby Primarchs are in into a giant rift portal and throws them all throughout the universe. Big E is a little upset about this, obviously, as his Primarchs are now hurtling through space, landing on different planets. A lot of which for better or for worse. For better, like Rabute Gilliman landing on a planet where he had a dad that loved him. Or you could be like Angeron and land on a planet where you're immediately enslaved, have butcher's nails spiked into your head that just increase your rage and anger and like violence tendencies in your brain. Better for worse. But he then went out to go reconquer the planets that humanity had lost during this giant, just 10 millennia of nothing. And in the process, gathering up all of his Primarchs again. With each Primarch, he gave them their legion and had them go out and do the same. This was the Great Crusade. And in this, the Emperor led the armies of mankind and retook a lot of space. But this eventually also ended. Typical thing with 40K. If someone's on top for a bit, they immediately got to get smacked down. And this would be the Horus heresy.
Son, have you been reading heresy recently? Unacceptable.
After a giant victory against the orcs, the Battle of Olenor, the Emperor took all of his sons, had a giant big parade, and in that moment gave the position of War Master, the leader of the Great Crusade, to his favorite son, Horus. Horus is literally like perfect. Everyone loves him. And he's a great leader, great military strategist, excellent warrior, and like the only one of the Primarchs that the Emperor actually showed like fatherly affection to, because it's a pretty common trend, and this will be repeated throughout the series. The Emperor sucks as a dad. He's a horrible dad. Treats his kids really bad. But to Horus, his most trusted son, he gave this position of War Master. And in the moment too, the Emperor gave this position like, my son, you're the only one I trust. Here's the position of War Master. Lead the Great Crusade in my stead. Lead humanity to greatness. And Horus just, oh, Dad, I really appreciate this thing. I don't think I'm worthy, but cool, man. Anyways, what are you planning on doing? You seem like you're going back to Terra to go work on something. What's your plans? And then the Emperor responds with, I don't trust you enough to tell you my plans. This obvious whiplash between I trust you implicitly and I love you to I don't trust you, I can't trust you, that grows some resentment. And as well, the other Primarchs were kind of miffed that they weren't chosen. Despite the fact, like, I want to say like most of them, like Horus was the right pick. The rest are like shitty. A few of them, like, they can't lead their own armies, let alone everyone. But regardless, this resentment towards Horus and his own insecurities flaring up led to some resentment and some problems and self-doubt. And with these like thoughts, chaos can kind of get their fingers into it. These chaos gods can start worming their way in and manipulate you. And this cultivated with a slimy little bald fuck named Erebus. Erebus is the cause of like a lot of the major problems during the Horus heresy. Man's a fuckhead. He came in, got into the good graces of Horus, and when Horus was mortally wounded through a scheme caused by Erebus. Erebus did a ritual to bring him back. But in this ritual, he showed Horus in the psychic vision the future of the Imperium, a galactic theocratic government where everyone worships the Emperor as a god. People are expendable, and it's a horrible, grimdark future. He showed Horus the 41st millennium. Horus then immediately was like, this is kind of fucked. This goes against what we've been fighting for the past 1,000 years. It's kind of a problem. And Erebus was spinning this whole thing like, this is what the Emperor wants. If you don't do anything, this is what's going to happen. So Horus decides in that moment to fight back against the Emperor, betray his father, and lead whoever he can to Terra to kill the Emperor and take over his position so he can make sure that future never happens. And this led to 2 pretty major battles: the Drop Site Massacre and the virus bombing of Istvan III. After his big vision and deciding to turn traitor, Horus got some of his brothers that had existing resentment towards the Emperor. Angron, Perturabo, Conrad Kurz, and a few more. He got them all on his side, and he laid a trap. For these legions, a good chunk of them were pretty down for going traitor, but some of them weren't. So he had to get rid of these parts. This would lead to the virus bombing of Istvan III, where he created a fake battle that sent all these loyalists down planetside and then bombed them all with flesh-eater virus bombs from orbit, killing all but a few. As well, the absolute chat of a man, Nathaniel Garo, escaped this whole awful situation, brought word back to Terra saying Horus has turned evil, he just did something pretty bad, and brought back more armies, the loyalists fighting back against Horus. And this led to the Drop Site Massacre, where a vital blow was struck against the loyalists. And with this, Horus and his warband could go all the way to Terra, which eventually led to the Siege of Terra, where a giant battle occurred. Brother killing brother, and it was an all-around bloody, horrible time. But the Emperor was able to go up to Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, where Horus had just killed his now new favorite son, Sanguinius, as he had to pick a new one once Horus turned evil. Saw his other favorite son killed by his favorite son. And in this moment, they fought. They dueled each other, and eventually leading to Horus being turned into a verb, as Horus got Horused. And what this means is the Emperor summoned as much psychic power as he could and deleted Horus's soul from existence. And that takes a lot of work. The only people who were previously able to do that were actual fucking gods. So it's a pretty big toll. In doing this, the Emperor was mortally wounded, had to be placed on this psychic amplifier / life support system called the Golden Throne, where he sits to this day, slowly rotting away, losing portions of his psyche as he keeps the Imperium running. As a big thing too, there's something called the Astronomicon, which is almost like a North Star for warp travel. You see the Astronomicon, you can travel anywhere you go. You know where you are in the universe when that thing is active. But if the Emperor dies, the Astronomicon turns off and back to square one. Back to that 10 millennia of just complete isolation for humanity. Can't have that happen. So to keep the Emperor alive, 1,000 souls are sacrificed to him a day to keep him alive. Pretty rough stuff, but human life in the Imperium, pretty expendable. So that leads us to present day 40K. Year 42 million, and humanity pretty fucked over in the end. But there's a lot of events in the interim during those 10 millennia. Age of Apostasy, High Fleet, Behemoth coming into the universe, Rise of the Tau, Plague Wars, Fall Acadia, and so on. But those will be talked about in individual faction videos, as those things come up pretty heavily in other people's lore and can be focused on a lot heavier. And as well, a lot of subjects I talk about in this video are going to be expanded on a lot more later on. So if you're interested in this and you want to follow up on that series, subscribe, like the video, share, do all the dumb YouTube shit. But see ya.